This is AgriTalk right here on KTN Farmers TV. My name is Kelvin Nyakundi. Thank you for joining us today. Now, today we'll be talking about the digitization of agriculture and how the youth can gain from this. We are in the digital season right now, and we have many inventions that have come up. And we have Patrick Maina, who is a digital expert, and he's here to just tell us more about this and how you as a youth who is trying to get into agriculture can gain from this. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Calvin.
All right, so first of all, just let us know what you do so that at least we can continue.
So my name is Patrick Maina. I'm a lawyer and I'm also a consultant on digital innovations. Currently, I'm developing programs that support youth in employment through digital technologies.
And for maybe how long have you been doing this?
So I've been doing this for 10 years, at least the technology part. I have a background in starting technology startups. About 10 years ago, I founded a fintech startup, and later on, I also formed others. So progressively, I went into consultancy, and I identified agriculture as a huge area that is very ripe for digital disruption, if I can call it that.
All right, very interesting. So let us now look at the background of technology. You've been doing this for 10 years. So tell us the history of how this has come into being now a topic of discussion.
Sure. So I think when you consider digitalization in general, it's heavily characterized by change in processes, yeah? So in either the way we go about various practices or our modes of life. I think, for instance, of the cash and payment space that was heavily disrupted by M-Pesa, and even bringing it much closer, the effects that were brought about from the COVID pandemic, which literally disrupted our way of living, how we learn, and even how we go about our lifestyle. So think about shopping, e-commerce. So that discussion now has begun to pivot into the agriculture space. And so we're trying to see how we can use technology to improve the various agricultural practices that have been going on. And even more importantly, to see how we can use technology as the proverbial carrot on the stick to onboard as many youth as possible into this sector.
And so when we look at the way you've really explained it and trying to involve the youth, when you look at agriculture and look at technology or digitalization, you can't really marry them together. So why digitalization in agriculture? Why are we looking at it right now?
Yeah, so I think some of the statistics indicate that about 1 million youth in Kenya come into the job market every year. I mean, every single year. Now you think about the employment opportunities that we have. I was recently in an event where the PS for public service indicated that there are about 67,000 civil servants nationally, and these are people who includes people who have been working for decades. I heard the CEO of Equity Bank, which has a presence in multiple countries in East Africa, say that they have about 10,000 employees in all those regions, at least who are directly employed. And so you start to ask certain very pertinent questions. So where do all these other youth go to? Fortunately, we have an abundance of arable land. And again, over 70% of the Kenyan population resides in the rural areas.
Yes.
And so we wanted now to see how we can leverage what is already available for the youth who are predominantly in the rural areas, and try to create a low-hanging fruit for them to plug into employment, self-employment, sustainable livelihoods through agribusiness. And again, we want to talk more about agribusiness as opposed to agriculture. I think when you talk about agriculture, we think of the stereotypical lady amejifunga kitambaa, shuka, has a baby on her back, and is probably holding a farming hoe. And again, also, agriculture, for a lot of us, when we were going through school, it almost felt like a form of punishment, you know? Or if you're threatened, you're told, if you don't perform well, you go back home and all you'll do is kulima. So I think now we want to change that mindset, because definitely we have on one side a problem in employment. Again, if you also look at the Big Four agenda, one of the areas of focus was actually food security. So then how do we marry the two? By addressing the issue of employment and trying to use the energy, resourcefulness, and building specific skills in youth that could help us also address the issue of food security.
Yeah. And now, on the point of changing the mindset of the youth, what are some of the things that we can do to change the mindset? Because, youth love things that are not very serious, also they love interesting things. So how do we change the mindset of the youth and tell them, all right, you can get into agribusiness, you can create opportunities, you can also make employment for some other people. So how do we do this?
Yeah. Sometimes I empathize with the youth because you think about the fact that they go through school, they are told, so many vijana, kuna kazi huko mbele.
Yeah.
But the reality, even as just from what I've alluded, is that's not the case. So now there is a gap when it comes to training the youth. So the youth need to have certain specific skills that now they can leverage to help them generate or build businesses that can sustain them and their communities. But then again, within that training, there are different modes of different areas of training. So what we've tried to do ourselves is now the area of digital literacy, where now we train youth on digital marketing, how to expand their markets beyond the boundaries of their counties. Yes. or their villages, and also train them on how they can also access online business services. Now they can be able to formalize their businesses, and as a result position themselves either for financing or business contracts. And then also we train them on agri-technology tools that they can use to help them advance their businesses. So talk about record-keeping tools, talk about also certain tools that could also help them in their actual farming practice. There are even apps right now that you could comfortably hire out a tractor for a few hours without necessarily having to own one.
Yeah.
So that area of training is very important. But then also, beyond the training, there is also the aspect of mentorship. So now you have trained the youth. What do you do next? You literally have to work with them and try to see now from the skills they have been able to acquire, how are they applying? But then even more importantly, we need an ecosystem that will be able to receive these youth who have gone through training and mentorship and now be able to put them through a system where now they can be able to be self-sustaining. I know you said sometimes it looks like they're not serious.
Yeah.
But I feel today's youth need a trigger for their passions. It's not like years back where it was almost systematic that you have to go through a certain program from school all the way to getting employment. I think now that the dynamics have really changed. And again, we are living, like you started by saying, in a heavily digitalized world.
Yeah.
Where opportunities are coming up every now and then. So even an opportunity that was not there 2 years ago now has become very, very tacit and very, very pertinent to society.
Yes.
So now we need to think of the training, the mentorship, and now the onboarding into various ecosystems that now can support them. But then again, also, the youth need to lean into these opportunities because they also have to be very proactive. The government can do so much. We've already mentioned the numbers in employment, in government. Private sector can also do so much. But then the youth really need to be proactive and seize these opportunities because they are quite a number, and a lot of them are also bearing fruit for quite a number of youth in urban and rural areas.
And now, this is a really interesting conversation because now when we look at the youth seizing the opportunities, what can they do? Because when it comes to agriculture and being even an entrepreneur in agriculture, financing is one of the problems that challenges rather that youths face. So how does a youth look at an opportunity and say, all right, I have a place that I can get financing from, and also I can make sure that I seize this opportunity? How does that happen? Because when it comes to that, youth don't have a way of getting finances.
Sure.
Yes.
When you think of agriculture, especially because we're talking about agriculture here, it's heavily devolved, and the counties are actually doing a lot in trying to identify, select, and onboard youth into the agribusiness space. So I'll give you an example of one of the programs that I've been involved in, Markup Kenya, which aims at linking youth entrepreneurs who are in specific horticultural value chains like French beans, nuts, herbs, and spices to the European market. And so part of that program involves training. So what happens is, for instance, we did a program in Siaya a few months ago, and where the county now were able to select various youth representatives from groups that are in agribusiness. So already, it's important if you're in, say, agribusiness, it's important for people to know you're in that space, yeah? So one way to do that is either to join a youth group, or to join a cooperative, or to join a circle that heavily advances agribusiness practices. Then beyond that, we have partnerships now, because Markup is driven by UNIDO, the United Nations Industrial Development Organization.
Yes.
It's also supported by FAO, the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, as well as GIZ, which is a German organization. And so once now the youth have been identified, then we, through the program, we try to see what gaps can be solved, what challenges are they facing, and what can we provide to them to mitigate some of those problems. So one of them, of course, like you said, is financing. But financing is not entirely it, because you think about, I mean, sometimes there are those businesses that you do need, you can actually start off without the need for financing, yeah? But now we take them through financial literacy training as well. We have been very fortunate to partner with Equity Group Foundation, which now trains the youth on financial literacy skills, and then they are able to decide whether they are ready for financing, or which usually come in the form of loans and facilities. Then beyond that, now those entrepreneurs now are put in focus groups, and now either one of these organizations will now come to the ground and work with them on the ground to see them realize some of the objectives in their businesses. So it involves quite a number of partnerships, right from the county government to the non-governmental space, to the to the to the private sector. But again, like I said, be somewhere as a youth first. I mean, yes, you're an agribusiness. Don't operate in a vacuum. Try to identify if you're in, say, a specific value chain like tomatoes. Try to find out who else around your area is doing tomatoes. And again, because predominantly a lot of the farmers in Kenya are small-scale farmers. Yeah, you know, they're operating less than an acre of land. You know. So if you look at the viability or scalability of some of these projects, there is a need to pull together, even when you're seeking for markets. So the youth should be encouraged to plug themselves into already existing organizations or groups. And I've seen it work very well for youth groups in places like Siaya, Kakamega, even in Turkana, where we've even had the opportunity to train youth who are in livestock keeping. Some of them are also doing fantastic farming in Popo. So, but they're in groups. So they, in fact, even one way they even raise initial startup capital is through table banking, even before they go to the banks, you know. So let the youth be encouraged to be part of a specific group. And then through that now, the organizations and the entities that are involved in upskilling them can easily identify them. Yeah.
And very well put. Now, let us look at when a young person is in high school and they've gone through high school, they want to come to campus. So do you think some of this knowledge can be imparted in them when they are in high school? Because now, you know, you go through the process, you finish campus, you know, there's an office job coming for me tomorrow.
Sure.
So what do you think about that?
It's interesting you should say that. In June or May, there was the very first national mentorship conference in Kenya, which was organized by the Ministry of Education, an NGO called I Choose Life Africa, and supporting agencies like the UN through the Food and Agriculture Organization. How that mentorship has been structured, program, because the idea is now to disseminate it into different levels in the counties, is the mentorship actually starts from high school. So there's mentorship for high school, there's mentorship for those who are going through tertiary education, mostly who are actually in TVETs. And then there are those now who want to enter the job market. And so it's never too early for mentorship or training. I believe that even when you start early, you are able now to narrow down the focus for the youth. So even at high school level, if we are able to introduce certain skills early enough, that means that by the time this student or this youth comes into, complete school, then they have a slightly better idea than somebody who didn't go through that program. So even from that national mentorship conference, we actually were able to hear stories from young ladies who teachers mentored them, and they identified the skills that they have, and they guided them into what kind of career choices they should make, what kind of subjects they should look out for, what kind of extra activities that they should pursue beyond just classwork, you know. And then we had from one of them who's now who was the only automotive engineer in her class, female engineer in her class, just because she was mentored by her class teacher. So the impact is very real, but again, a lot more interventions need to be done because there is the issue of awareness. How many youths actually know that these opportunities are there? How do they access them? So definitely, the programs are there, but I feel like people are speaking in silos, you know? So all hands need to be on deck, and definitely that is the fastest way to even realize a greater impact.
And you've touched on a question that I was about to ask, because we find that the whole country you can say these programs are working in maybe different areas, silos, the way you've called them.
Yeah.
And you find that it's not everywhere in Kenya.
Yeah.
So how do we make sure that this is something that almost every youth, even the youth in the rural area, the one that cannot access internet, knows that this is happening? Because not everyone accesses electricity, not everyone has internet. So
Yeah.
what needs to be done in order for every
Wow.
youth to get into this?
Man, a lot, to be honest. I mean, there are quite a number of barriers that I can already see. Of course, one of them being infrastructure. You know, you just talked about internet and electricity. The reality is the farther you move away from the cities, the farther you are from these kind of necessities,
Exactly.
whether it's power or internet, you know. So that is definitely a huge barrier for youth, especially to come into the digital space. However, there are ongoing measures. I mean, the government, yes, is trying to lay fiber networks all over the country, trying to get into partnerships with the private sector for the same, but there's still a lot to be done there. Also, there is the challenge of devices, because you realize a lot of the youth, the first point of contact with the internet is through the smartphone.
Yes.
But then again, you look at the numbers, less than half of the youth in Kenya actually own smartphones. Most of them are on what we call feature phones, or when you go there in inaitwa Kabambe or Katululu, you know. So that's the reality.
Yes.
And I'll even go to the cost of data and internet services that has also limited access of youth to digital services in general. And then also, which is now what we've been very heavily focused through these programs, the issue of digital literacy skills.
Yes.
Because it's fine to say that, you know, now we are a more progressive society because now kids as young as 4 years old can use a phone. But the reality is that doesn't make them a digitally literate person. So now, like I said, all hands need to be on deck. So if it's the infrastructure, how can we expedite that? How can we have more synergies around that area? So that now, even the youth in Garissa, in Lokicha, in Turkana,
Yes.
you know, they can still be able to access the same internet. And remember also, you see, Nairobi is interesting because the average wage is higher than if you go to the rural areas. But then what does not change is the cost of data.
Yeah.
You see, so while here, I mean, somebody could be able to afford the cost of data or absorb it. When you go to the rural areas, now they have to start making serious decisions, whether it's food or data or medicine or those other kind of things. So all hands need to be on deck, definitely. But there's a lot of opportunity. And I've also seen, even as part of trying to mitigate these challenges, there have been partnerships that have been forged to set up incubation hubs and accelerators that identify startups in agribusiness, put them onto the incubation platform, and then during a period of months, they give them these skills, they help them regularize their business, and then now they're able to release them into the market with a bit more empowerment, you know. I know even the government itself, through Kirdi, has been doing that. In fact, one of the youth we trained in Siaya was actually from Kakamega. He has an interesting story. It's called Shava. And so Shava finished college at JQuad. I believe he did computer science. Then went to Kakamega in 2019. Then COVID started, early 2020. So he went to his dad and he asked for a loan. I think his dad gave him maybe 200,000, 300,000 because he wanted to build a greenhouse structure. And so he did it. Unfortunately, To his own words, he said that he only raised 3,000 shillings. But now he was able to be linked to an incubation program supported by Kirdi. And what Kirdi did, because Shava was growing tomatoes in his greenhouse, so they were able to train him on value addition. And so these tomatoes now were converted into chutney, which is a form of paste. And now he's able to package them, and he ships them to Nairobi every week. Again, he set up an Instagram page, which predominantly is where he gets his market from. Mm-hmm. And so if you ask Shava right now, he feeds and clothes and lives off agribusiness. But you can tell the transition he had to go through for him to achieve that.
All right, Patrick, we just have to go for a short break. That is Patrick. We are talking about youth and how digitalization is helping change the perspective on agriculture. We are going for a short break. We'll be right back with more. Welcome back. This is AgriTalk, and today we are talking about digitalization in agriculture. And we have Patrick Maina here, who is a digital expert. He's also a lawyer, and we are just discussing on how we can change the perspective and try to help the young generation just get into agriculture using digital solutions. And we are continuing with the conversation. And you had spoken about the proactivity, the proactive youth, and how they need to get into this and be interested. And also, adding to that, we also spoke about the youth in the rural areas and how they can get interested in this. And even when there is no internet, when there is no electricity, so we are saying something needs to be done. What do you think are some of the things that we can do to these youth who don't have access to, who have the two small phones?
The Katululu.
Yeah.
The Kabambe.
So what needs to be done to get them interested in this?
Yeah. I guess where we should start from is to be context specific. What that means is let's design programs that are youth driven. Sometimes I feel we invent these programs out there, then we come and apply them to the youth. So it feels like we are talking at the youth, and that always brings its challenges. So one area to start from is always identify the gaps, because the challenges that maybe a youth in agribusiness in Siaya County has will not necessarily be the same that a youth agribusiness farmer in Turkana will have. And think about it this way. In Kisumu or Nairobi, for instance, a majority of the youth, or a good number of the youth, if I may say that, own smartphones. Then in Turkana, from my experience, almost all the youth that we were training had the feature phones, which were the non-smartphones,
Yes.
So then, how do you go to these youth in Turkana and tell them that they can still be part of the digital inclusion? You see, so work with what they have. Work with what they have. So, for instance, if that youth in Turkana has the feature phone, how can they leverage or explore the digital world through that feature phone? SMS still remains a very important tool for communication. So organizations or partners in agriculture should also use SMS as a communication tool to push information. One of the platforms that is supported by the UN is AgriTalk, which basically every other time they are dispensing information to the youth via SMS, and also allowing youth to participate in polls and conversations through the SMS platform. So it doesn't mean that you have to be connected to the internet. But again, yes, the internet is very important. But we have to look at the issue of the digital divide, which can either be gender-based or it can also be based on where you live.
Yes.
So you even look at certain communities where devices are owned by men or are in the control of men.
Yeah.
You know, so now that brings the issue of the digital gender divide. But then, does it mean that now you lock out the women? Not necessarily. If you can go and talk to the men, because some of these communities also have their women or the ladies married very young, you know, in their early teens, but can still approach the men and try to create a different mind shift for them. Now to be able to extend those same devices to the women, because at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is create a sustainable livelihood for these families. Yeah. So try to see the specific gaps that need to be addressed urgently, and look for the low-hanging fruits. Yeah, don't, I mean, especially when you're starting out with the youth, don't complicate it for them. You know, try to give them things that they already know.
Yes.
Especially even from the examples that I've given. Yeah.
And also, on that, trying to just text to them something that they know and using what they have to pass on this information. How do we then create opportunities when it comes to digital inclusion of the youth? How do we create opportunities for employment? How do we create opportunities for them to get to feel like now I'm included in this?
Yeah, yeah. So again, like I said, they have to lean in, but the opportunities are immense. You look at what social media has been able to do right now. You know, Facebook, WhatsApp, creating digital marketplaces there. You know, I don't know whether you saw this during at the height of the pandemic. Almost everybody was selling something online, whether on WhatsApp or Facebook, Instagram, you know. So that already creates an easy access for market linkages
Yes.
in agribusiness. You look at YouTube, for instance, and how youth now can be able now to gain more knowledge through YouTube and learn different farming practices, you know. For instance, China is the biggest e-commerce market for agro products, and they do that mostly through live streaming. So if we can borrow even lessons from that, and notwithstanding the challenges and the barriers of entry such as technology access, but there are certain areas that we could even start with, you know, because it has been done. Also, another area would be like the digital literacy programs, you know, that we're talking about, and there are many. I mean, FAO has a program called Opportunities for Youth in Africa. UNIDO now is also spearheading Markup Kenya, and all these have training elements, yeah. But they're in plenty, but the youths should not wait for them to be told some of these things. They should actually be very proactive and trying to seek them out. Yeah.
All right, and now let's go to food security. You had mentioned about food security. And when we look at food security, this is a topic of discussion each and every time.
Sure.
So when you talk about digitalization of agriculture, let's look at how we can include food security in this so that the youth coming up can get into this and make sure that they move this forward.
Yeah, I mean, digitalization can accelerate transformation of the food sector. If I think of production and efficiency, first of all, yeah, digitalization has the potential of accelerating what we call precision farming. So, meaning that you take very specific measures, or I mean precise measures for predictable outcomes, you know. So, I mean, right now we have technologies that could help you predict weather patterns even more accurately than before, you know. and these applications are even on the mobile phone. You know, some of them are even free. And like I said, there are even applications now that you can you can download them and be able to access farming equipment at a lease model rather than having to go out and buy them. So precision farming is heavily driven by digitalization. And so once we do that, we'll be able now to reduce, one, the wastage of resources that actually goes into farming, you know? And also on the other hand, you know, agriculture is one of the biggest contributors to carbon emissions. So there are actually digital tools now that are able now to help measure, control, and monitor some of these emissions, and thereby promote climate smart farming. Yeah? And then still on the same on digitalization and farming technology is in the process of all this, you are able to excite the youth into new areas of opportunity that even us ourselves we are yet to appreciate, you know, because when we talk about food security, we feel like we've been talking about the same topic since we were born. And unfortunately, we feel like we've also been doing the same things. So
Yeah.
now, if this now can be able to turn around the conversation, I think we'll be heading towards a better direction. Yeah.
All right, and you mentioned Markup
Yeah.
Kenya. So, in line with Markup Kenya, what recommendations would you make as far as youth and digitalization is concerned? Now, what would you just recommend for the youth now being interacted with Markup that you've just spoken about?
I mean, Markup has been very significant in upskilling, training, and empowering youth in agribusiness. Like I said, the idea is to link agribusiness farmers to export markets for certain value chains, predominantly in the horticultural space.
Yes.
Now, again, Markup, like a lot of these programs, sometimes they come to an end. So now you have to either bring on board another program. But what is important is the youth need to connect, because what we did with Markup, for instance, is the counties. They are the ones who know the youth on the ground.
Yes.
Counties have very well-resourced agricultural extension officers who now know exactly what is happening on the ground. So those agricultural extension officers should be the link between the youth and these programs. Because even these programs, before you go to the beneficiaries, you know, you go through the counties, you know, you give them the vision that you have for the county, for the beneficiaries, and then that way they are the ones who, through the agricultural extension officers, know or have already identified either groups, because they have very solid databases. They know which youth group is in tomato, which youth group is in nuts, which youth group is in chicken and poultry. They have all this information. So the youth, first of all, need to push their county officers. Yeah, especially in the agricultural space. Go knock on their doors. Ask them, what opportunities do they have for us? What programs? Yeah, and they have quite a number. But go and knock on their doors. And then through that, they'll be able now, even if they don't have an opportunity at that moment, they have this database, like I said. So they're already now able to collect what is working with which counties. In fact, they even have information up to the ward level. So from where you are at your own ward, there are also either youth officers, like I said, agricultural extension officers. So try to see how, and youth group leaders.
Yes.
So those are the ones now who will push this conversation. So let the youth connect with these individuals, because that will be a faster way to take up some of these programs.
And looking at the digital space, it continues to grow as years are moving on, it continues to grow. So, and of course, when it continues to grow, the agri SMEs, the agri businesses that we have also will have to get into the space and continue to just embrace what the digital space is doing. So going forward, what are we looking at in the agriculture sector?
Going forward, we are anticipating that there will be more youth coming in, a lot more youth, especially with more awareness, more training, more mentorship. We expect more youth to come on board. However, we urgently need certain policies and strategies
Yes.
to come into place from the government level that will encourage the growth of this space. For instance, we don't have any specific strategy on digitalization of agribusiness, you know. And so if you're using that as a carrot on the stick to invite the youth into this space, could we have a specific strategy that cuts across all the counties? Like I had said earlier, I feel like people are speaking in silos, you know, they're operating from silos.
Yeah.
Whether it's counties or NGOs or everybody else who's involved there. And so you'll even find, in some cases, the same youth group that was trained maybe by one organization
Is the same.
is the same being trained by another organization. And so if everybody now had maybe even one common database where we know that, okay, so these are the youth who are in this value chain, for instance, and then they have gone through this kind of training, whether it's digital or financial literacy. So how many of them are yet to go through it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, these ones have gone through this training. Now they should go through mentorship. How many of those have gone through mentorship? What is the impact also that has been measured along the way? So I still go back to the point on synchronized energies. Because agribusiness on its own is very expansive, and digitalization is equally very complex.
Yes.
So, and there is no one size fits all, especially when it comes to digitalization, even just from the examples I've given in Turkana and Siaya and Kisumu, and even here in Nairobi. So, synergized efforts will push and accelerate impact driven, because at the end of the day what we want is impact. We don't want you just to go through the program and get a t-shirt or a certificate, take photos,
Yeah.
and say, yeah, we did this. We want to know, okay, you went through this training,
What are you doing?
what are you doing with the skills you acquired?
Yes.
Yeah, and then what else do you need to be done? You know, okay, we did training, we took you through mentorship, either connecting you with your peers who now have benefited from certain practices, and you can learn from them. So what has happened to you in the process? Okay, fine, you have gone through the mentorship. Now you want to connect maybe with the industries in the area. Maybe you've been connected with Kevian, or that makes juice, or Bitco that processes edible oils. You know what has come out of that.
Yeah.
But what I also want to insist is, let us not look at agriculture as purely as a farming device, if I can call it that. We need to emphasize on value addition. Value addition is very important. Like the story of Shava. I mean, Shava failed initially with his tomatoes in his greenhouse. But then what happened when he introduced a process of value addition? He's now selling almost 100 jars every week.
Wow.
And most of them is out of Kakamega, shipping them directly to Nairobi, predominantly through Instagram and online orders. So those are the areas I would identify.
And you've really mentioned an interesting thing, where you find the same group of youths who are being trained maybe this year are the same group of youths that are going to be trained 2 years to come. And so how do we make sure that this doesn't happen? Because, you know, maybe in the village, we usually have youths who complete school from there and they just come to the city. So what needs to be done? Because at the end of the day, what you're saying could be what is happening. You find 5 years down the line, they will have like maybe the same 3 people in the same 5 years with just maybe a few other people. So what needs to be done? Maybe can there be like data that shows you came this time? Now we want to. What needs to be done?
In fact, we have a term for those kind of youth. We call them donorpreneurs, because you know some of this training, they get facilitation, you know,
Yes.
one way or another. So yeah, so we actually have a name even for those kind of youth. They're called donorpreneurs, and because unfortunately they go from one donor-funded training to another, and they are provided with facilitation. But again, that is such a short-term solution, because facilitation is not where we want. We don't want to encourage that kind of culture. We want to encourage a culture where youth are able to set up their own agribusinesses, run them, and feed off them together with their families, you know. And it's very possible, yeah. So on the question on the database, yes, it's very important for us to have one at the end of the day, almost like a national database.
Yes.
Not necessarily run by the government, but it could be a concerted effort of different players in the agriculture space, where we're able to identify how many youth have gone. First of all, we identify what counties have what crops. It's election season, people are talking about one crop per county, but even if there are multiple per counties, let all that be documented, then see different youth groups who are involved in different value chains. What skills do they have? What do they need? What have they gone through? And have this platform accessible to everyone, so that if I'm a player in this market, in this sector, and I want to train youth in Webuye, you know, I can easily just go onto the platform and see that these are the youth who are there. This is what they need. This is what they've been able to acquire so far. And this is what you can be able to provide. That way, it will be much easier to talk about digitalization of the agriculture sector in whole. Yeah, because even that way now you can even pinpoint what areas you can leverage
Yes.
to almost sort out food insecurity challenges in certain parts of this country. Yeah.
All right, thank you so much for joining us. Unfortunately, that was our time. All right, that has been Patrick Maina. He is a digital expert and also a lawyer who is passionate about making sure that youths are involved in the digitalization of agriculture. And I believe you've learned a lot, and you as a youth there at home, and you want to get into this. What are you doing? What are you involving yourself in groups in your area? Do you know the people around you, what they're doing in agriculture? Get into that and try and just seize the opportunities that are there for you. My name is Kelvin Nyakundi. This is AgriTalk. Let's meet next time right here on KTN Farmers TV.